The void between stars is not silent. It thrums with the energy of distant suns and the faint, ghostly trails of ships that stitch the darkness with light. One such ship, the Galactic Federation vessel Stargazer, hung in the velvet black, a silver pearl against the infinite. Inside its observation deck, the silence was of a different kind, the tense, brittle quiet of a gamble about to be called. Ambassador Kalen stood, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, watching the approach of the Crotheron battleship. It was a leviathan of jagged, volcanic rock and glowing obsidian, a piece of a hostile world torn from its foundations and set adrift. This was the moment. Decades of Cold War, of border skirmishes and diplomatic slights, were to be set aside. The Crothar were the most formidable warrior culture in the known galaxy, and today, they had agreed to talk. Beside him, his 5-year-old daughter, Elara, sat on the plush carpet, entirely unconcerned with galactic politics. She was building a precarious tower of magnetic blocks, her small tongue stuck out in concentration. Her world was the colorful blocks, the soft hum of the ship, and the comforting presence of her father. She was the only child on this diplomatic mission, a piece of home Kalen had refused to leave behind. Remember the protocols, everyone. Kalen's voice was low but carried through the comms to his team. No sudden movements. Respect their personal space. They value strength, but it is the strength of resolve, not aggression. Let's show them we are a people worthy of peace. The Crotheron delegation boarded with a sound like grinding stone. They were massive, each standing over 8 feet tall, their hides a mosaic of rugged, stone-like plates, deep gray and ochre. Their eyes glowed with a soft, amber light from within deep-set sockets. They moved with a weighty, deliberate grace that made the very deck plates vibrate. Their leader, Chieftain Borak, was a mountain of a being, his shoulders broad, his head crowned with a crest of crystalline spikes that caught the light. Elara peeked from behind her father's legs, her blue eyes wide with curiosity, not fear. To her, they looked like the walking mountains from her storybooks. The formal greetings were exchanged, translated through discrete units. Borak's voice was a low rockslide. We come in the spirit of curiosity, Ambassador. Your kind is fragile. Your history is brief. Yet you have survived where others have not. This merits inspection. We are honored by your inspection, Chieftain Borak, Kalen replied, his tone even. We believe our differences can be our greatest strength. The talks proceeded with glacial care. The Crothar were direct, their logic brutal and uncompromising. They spoke of resources, of territorial boundaries, of military preparedness. It was a language of power. The human delegation spoke of shared knowledge, cultural exchange, and mutual growth. It was a language of potential. The two perspectives circled each other like wary animals. After an hour, Borak raised a heavy hand, silencing his own aides. Enough of these words. They are air. We have brought something. A token of our people. A measure of our intent. A heavy container was brought forward by 2 Crothar guards. It was forged from a dark, non-reflective metal, etched with runes that pulsed with a faint, inner fire. The air around it shimmered with contained heat. In our culture, Borak intoned, his voice dropping into a ceremonial rhythm, the greatest trust is not given. It is demonstrated. It is proven through the sharing of danger, and the respect for power. A seam appeared on the container, hissing open. A wave of dry, superheated air washed over the room. We are a people born of fire and stone. Our world is harsh. Our companions are harsher. Inside the container, nestled on a bed of glowing embers, was a creature. It was the size of a large dog, but no dog ever looked like this. Its body was covered in scales of cracked, black basalt, from which seams of molten orange light seeped, like lava flowing through rock. Its eyes were pools of furious, white-hot magma. Smoke curled from its nostrils, and when it shifted, the sound was of grinding pebbles. Its tail, thick and powerful, ended in a spiked, volcanic rock. This was no delicate hatchling, it was a fragment of a violent, young planet given life. A magma hatchling, Borak announced, a note of profound pride in his voice. The young of the Ember-Age drakes, the titans that carve the continents of our homeworld. They are born in the calderas of active volcanoes. They breathe fire that can melt battle plate. As adults, they are living siege engines. To raise one is the highest honor a Crotharon warrior can aspire to. To offer one, is without precedent. The human delegation took an involuntary step back. The creature radiated pure, untamed thermonuclear fury. It was, by any objective measure, terrifying. Ilara, however, had finally abandoned her blocks. She had crept closer, drawn not by fear, but by the light. The shifting, glowing patterns within its scales were the most beautiful things she had ever seen. It shimmered. It was like a living, breathing lantern. The hatchling let out a low, grating growl, a sound that promised immolation. Its molten eyes scanned the room, radiating hostility and confusion. Ilara stopped a few feet away, tilting her head. She wasn't seeing a weapon. She wasn't seeing a symbol of power. She was seeing a baby, far from home, surrounded by giants, and looking very, very upset. She pointed a tiny finger, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a clear bell. "Daddy," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look. The rocky puppy is so cute." The word hung in the air. Cute. It was a linguistic atom bomb. The Crotharon translators struggled, offering synonyms: diminutive, aesthetically pleasing, pitiable. Chieftain Borak stared, his stony face unreadable, but the glow in his eyes intensified. The young of your species lacks perception. This is not cute. This is power incarnate. This is the heart of the forge. But Ilara was already moving. She took a small step forward, then another, ignoring her father's sharp, whispered warning. She crouched down, making herself small, and looked directly into the creature's blazing eyes. "It's okay," she cooed, in the same gentle voice she used for the scared kitten they'd found back on Earth. "You're all shiny and warm. Don't be scared." The magma hatchling, bred for millennia to respond to challenges of dominance, was completely disarmed. This tiny, soft being showed no aggression. It projected no fear. It offered only a soft, sympathetic tone. The hatchling's grinding growl faltered. It cocked its head, mimicking her gesture, a cascade of tiny embers sprinkling from its neck. "See?" Ilara said, smiling. "You're a good rocky puppy, aren't you?" And then she did the unthinkable. She reached out a small, pale hand to touch it. Kalen's heart stopped. A strangled "no" died in his throat, trapped by the sheer, paralyzing terror of what was about to happen. He saw his daughter's small, vulnerable hand moving toward a creature whose very touch could sear flesh from bone. He saw the Crotharon warriors tense, their hands drifting to the hafts of weapons that hummed with latent energy. This was it. The moment peace shattered, incinerated by a child's innocent gesture. Ilara's fingertips brushed the rough, warm scales between the hatchling's eyes. The creature flinched, a small shudder running through its stony body. The orange glow in its seams flared for a second, and a puff of hot, sulphurous smoke escaped its nostrils. But it did not recoil. It did not attack. It pressed its head forward, ever so slightly, into her touch. A sound emerged from deep within its chest, not a growl, but a low, resonant rumble, like stones tumbling gently in a far-off stream. It was, unmistakably, a purr. The observation deck was frozen in a tableau of disbelief. The Crothar stood as if turned to the very stone they resembled. Chieftain Borak's jaw, a formidable slab of granite, had gone slack. Their entire understanding of reality, a philosophy forged in fire and combat, had just been invalidated by a 5-year-old girl. He's warm, Daddy. Elara giggled, stroking the hatchling's head with more confidence. And he rumbles. The spell was broken by the shriek of alarms. The hatchling, sudden movement, its flare of heat, had triggered the ship's sensitive environmental sensors. Red light strobed across the room. The automated voice of the Stargazer's AI echoed, calm and cold. Thermal anomaly detected. Containment protocols initiated. Seal Sector 7. In the chaotic flash of lights and sound, the magma hatchling, startled from its moment of calm, reverted to its base instincts. Fear. It screeched, a sound of tearing metal and shattering rock, and bolted. It didn't head for the humans or the Krothar. It moved with surprising speed, a blur of heated stone, and slammed into a ventilation grate. The metal glowed red, then white, and gave way with a shriek of its own. In a shower of molten droplets, the hatchling vanished into the ship's ductwork. Chaos erupted. The creature is loose. Borak roared, his voice reclaiming its command. It is frightened. A frightened drake is a destructive force. You must evacuate this section immediately. All personnel, this is not a drill. Kalen barked into his comm, his diplomat's composure shattered, replaced by a captain's urgency. Hostile life form loose in the ventilation system. Initiate lockdown. Get all non-essential personnel to safe zones. He scooped Elara into his arms. She was crying now, confused and frightened by the noise and the sudden loss of her new friend. But the rocky puppy is scared, she wailed. I know, sweetheart, I know, Kalen said, his mind racing. He looked at Borak. Chieftain. Your people know this creature. How do we contain it without hurting it? Borak's glowing eyes were fixed on the melted vent. Hurt it? Ambassador, your concern is misplaced. The concern is that it will hurt you. It will not be contained. It must be dominated. Subdued. My warriors and I will hunt it. You will keep your people out of our way. The two philosophies were now in open, violent conflict. The human way was to contain and protect. The Krotharon way was to hunt and dominate. The hunt was a disaster. The Stargazer was a labyrinth of corridors, maintenance shafts, and sensitive equipment. The Krothar, for all their strength, were not built for stealth. Their heavy footfalls echoed, their shouted commands only served to panic the hatchling further. Security cameras tracked its path of destruction, a melted data conduit here, a scorched wall panel there. It was a terrified animal, cornered in a metal maze. Kalen, from the security bridge, watched the feeds with a growing sense of dread. It's heading toward the hydroponics bay, he said, his blood running cold. The oxygen gardens. The plant life will be fuel for its fire, Borak grunted, watching from over Kalen's shoulder. It will feel trapped there. It will burn everything. Or it will hide, a new voice said. Dr. Eris, the ship's xenobiologist, was studying the thermal signatures. Look at its pattern. It's not attacking. It's fleeing. It's seeking a heat source. It's a creature of extreme environments, and our ship is cold and sterile to it. It's not being aggressive, it's being desperate. Meanwhile, Elara had been taken to her quarters by a junior officer. But the officer, distracted by another emergency call, had left her for a moment. That was all it took. Elara, her face still streaked with tears, had one goal: find the scared rocky puppy. She slipped out and, with a child's unerring instinct for getting lost, found her way into a service corridor that connected to the hydroponics bay. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped into a world of green and humidity. The air was thick with the smell of soil and growing things. The hatchling was there, in the center of a grove of Terran ferns. It was huddled, its glow dimmed, making itself small. It was shivering, its stony plates clicking softly together. It wasn't a weapon. It was a lost, cold, frightened baby. Elara walked toward it, her footsteps silent on the damp grass. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice cutting through the distant sounds of alarms and shouting. "I'm here." The hatchling looked up, its magma eyes wide. It recognized her. It remembered the gentle touch, the lack of fear. It let out a soft, pleading chirp. Elara didn't crouch this time. She sat down cross-legged a few feet away, pulling her knees to her chest. "It's really loud, isn't it?" she said. "And all the metal is cold. You don't like it." She started to hum, a simple, tuneless lullaby her mother used to sing to her. On the security bridge, they watched, breathless. The camera in the hydroponics bay showed the small girl and the dangerous creature, a scene of impossible tranquility. "She'll be killed," one of the security officers gasped. "No," Dr. Eris said, her eyes glued to the bioscanners. "Look. Its core temperature is dropping. Its stress hormones are plummeting. The humming, it's having a physiological effect." Borak was silent, a monument to cognitive dissonance. He saw his people's ultimate symbol of power, soothed not by a display of strength, but by a gentle song. In the garden, Elara stopped humming. "Are you hungry?" she asked. She fumbled in the pocket of her little jumpsuit and pulled out a slightly crushed nutrient bar, the kind she always carried for a snack. She broke off a small piece and carefully tossed it toward the hatchling. The creature sniffed the air, then crept forward. It nudged the bar with its snout. The nutrient bar, designed for human metabolism, began to smoke and blacken on contact. The hatchling didn't eat it. Instead, it looked back at Elara and made that same, low, rumbling purr. The message wasn't about food. It was about the gesture. It took a few more steps until it was right in front of her. It then lay down, folding its powerful legs beneath its body, and rested its heavy, warm head in her lap. Elara giggled, the sound pure and clear, and began to stroke the rough, warm scales of its head. "You're a good rocky puppy," she whispered. "I'm going to call you Cinder. Because you're warm, like cinders in a fireplace." In the security bridge, Chieftain Borak finally found his voice. It was softer than anyone had ever heard it. "Cinder," he repeated. The translator didn't struggle with this one. It was a name. Not a designation. Not a weapon serial number. A name. "The creature," Borak began, then corrected himself. "Cinder, has chosen." The silence in the security bridge was heavier than any Crothoron warship. Chieftain Borak stared at the monitor, his stony features etched with a profound confusion that was entirely new to him. On the screen, the little human girl, Elara, was now weaving a crown of white starflowers from the hydroponics garden, carefully placing it between the crystalline spikes on Cinder's head. The magma hatchling, this fragment of a violent world, sat with a stillness that was neither predatory nor defensive, but content. Its internal glow had stabilized to a soft, warm pulse, like a banked hearth. "She has named it," Borak finally said, the word sounding foreign and significant on his tongue. "She has," Kalen replied softly, his own heart swelling with a mixture of terror and overwhelming pride. "She sees a person, chieftain. Not a weapon." "This changes nothing of the law," Borak rumbled, but the conviction in his voice was cracking, revealing the uncertainty beneath. "The bond must be tested. It must be proven. A creature of such power cannot simply be a pet." "With all due respect," Dr. Eris interjected, her eyes still on her scanner readings. "This is far beyond a human keeping a pet. Look at the neural synchrony. Their biosignatures are harmonizing. When Elara's heart rate slows, so does Cinder's. When she feels calm, its internal temperature drops. This is a reciprocal bond. It's not ownership. It's a partnership." The debate that followed was a microcosm of the larger cultural clash. The Crothoron insisted on the trial of embers, an ancient ritual where a prospective rider and hatchling must navigate a chamber of geothermal hazards, proving their coordination and the rider's dominance over the creature's fiery nature. The humans argued for observation, for study, for understanding this new paradigm. But Borak was immovable. Tradition was the bedrock of his people. Without the trial, the bond was illegitimate, and Cinder would be reclaimed by force, his connection to Alara severed forever. And so, they found themselves in the Stargazer's main cargo bay, which had been hastily reconfigured. The Crotheron engineers, with a terrifying efficiency, had used portable forges and sonic resonators to create a scaled-down version of the Trial of Embers. The air shimmered with heat. Pits of simulated magma glowed ominously, and narrow, obsidian pathways wound between them. Geysers of superheated steam erupted at random intervals. To Alara, it looked like a scary playground. To everyone else, it looked like a death trap. "The rules are simple," Borak announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. A gallery of Crotheron warriors and human officers looked on from a shielded observation deck. The hatchling and the child must cross the chamber. They must ring the bell of dawn at the far end. They must do this together. If the child cannot control the creature, if it succumbs to fear or fury, they will fail. If they are harmed, the trial ends. Kaelin knelt before Alara, his hands on her shoulders. "Sweetheart, listen to me. This is very important. You and Cinder have to walk across that room. You have to stay on the black paths. Can you do that? Can you tell Cinder to stay with you?" Alara looked at the challenging course, then at Cinder, who was pressed against her side, his warm weight a comfort. She nodded seriously. "We can do it. We're friends. Friends stick together." She took a step onto the first obsidian path, her small hand resting on Cinder's stony neck. "Come on, Cinder. Let's go on an adventure." The trial began. The first challenge was a narrow bridge over a pit of glowing orange liquid. A traditional Crotheron rider would have commanded their drake to fly across, a show of mastery over the element. Alara simply started walking, her steps confident. Cinder hesitated at the edge, his instinct screaming at him to avoid the unstable path. He looked at Alara, already halfway across, turning back to wait for him. "It's okay, Cinder. You can do it," she called, her voice full of faith. That faith was the command he needed. He lowered his head and followed, his claws clicking on the stone, his weight making the bridge vibrate, but his trust in her keeping him steady. In the observation deck, Borak grunted. "It follows. It does not lead. This is not the way. Isn't it?" Dr. Eris countered. "Look. They're both safe. The goal is the destination, not the method." They reached the center of the chamber, a wide platform. Suddenly, a geyser of steam erupted to their left with a deafening roar. Cinder flinched, his fear spiking. The seams on his body flared bright orange, and he let out a panicked screech, turning his head as if to unleash a jet of flame. The Crotheron warriors leaned forward. This was the moment. This was where the child's feeble bond would break, and the beast's true nature would be revealed. But Alara didn't flinch. She didn't shout. She stepped in front of him, placing her small body between him and the scary noise, and began to sing. It was the same simple, tuneless lullaby from the garden. Her voice was tiny against the roar of the geyser, but Cinder heard it. His head swung toward her. The panic in his molten eyes receded, replaced by focus. On her. The orange glow in his scales dimmed back to its warm, steady pulse. He nudged her gently with his head, a silent thank you. The final challenge was the bell of dawn itself, hanging high above a final, wide pit. There was no bridge. The only way was for Cinder to use his nascent wings to carry them both. It was the ultimate test of control and trust. A Crotheron rider would issue a forceful command, a mental push of will. Alara looked up at the bell, then at Cinder. It's really high, she said, her confidence wavering for the first time. Can you help me? Can you fly us up there? She wasn't commanding. She was asking. She was vulnerable. Cinder looked at the bell, then at the small, trusting face of his friend. He understood the request. He lowered his body, and Elara, understanding, clumsily climbed onto his back, holding tightly to the spikes. With a powerful shudder of his wings, Cinder lifted off. It wasn't an elegant flight, it was an awkward, straining hop, but it was enough. He rose, hovering unsteadily before the bell. Elara, holding on with one hand, reached out and tapped the bell with the other. A clear, pure chime rang out through the cargo bay, a sound of perfect, resonant harmony. It was done. As Cinder landed gently on the other side, Elara sliding off his back and throwing her arms around his neck, the observation deck was utterly silent. Then, Chieftain Borak slowly, deliberately, removed his heavy ceremonial helmet. It was a gesture of profound respect, one never before offered to an off-worlder. The trial is complete, he announced, his voice stripped of all its former arrogance, filled instead with a kind of awe. The bond is true. It is, a new kind of bond. One we did not know was possible. He turned to Kaelin. Your daughter has not just passed a test, Ambassador. She has rewritten it. We have much to learn from you. In the years that followed, the Elara Protocol became a cornerstone of human-Crotheron relations. Joint creches were established where Crotheron young and human children, alongside magma hatchlings, were raised together, learning the languages of both strength and empathy. The Crotheron, once the galaxy's most feared warriors, began to discover that there were more ways to be strong than through domination. They found strength in protection, in loyalty, in the quiet, unyielding power of a promise kept. And on the observation deck of the Stargazer, now a museum ship, a small, weathered crown of starflowers sits in a display case. Next to it is a hologram of a little girl with a bright smile, her hand resting on the head of a creature of living stone and fire. The caption reads, "The day the galaxy learned to be cute."